This year's is faith-filled generosity. Can you tell us a little about this theme and why it is particularly important in this present situation?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you for asking that start-off question. I appreciate it. Just one moment of housekeeping before I get into it. If you have joined just recently, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to ask us questions. Every once in a while, we'll stop and we'll ask for questions that way. I'm going to share my screen, which is going to start a PowerPoint, and then we can all be on the same page, as it were. All right, welcome, friends, and thank you. So, faith-filled generosity. We encounter in Scripture an understanding that our generosity, our understanding of stewardship, our feelings of abundance come from our faith, come from our tradition. And so we begin this year's stewardship theme with this passage from 1 Timothy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that really is life. So, what does it mean to have a life that really is of life? And as we take hold of that, how can we, who are generous people, children of God, in community with each other, look at our resources and the way that we share our gifts with each other to dedicate ourselves to the good work of God? So as we've moved through Matthew's gospel this year, we have heard how Jesus teaches us to be in relationship with each other. And that relationship begins with the creation and our role in the recreation of the world given to us by God. This is how we are inspired by generosity. We have received so much, we give so much. That reciprocity, that harmony of relationship is one filled of faith and abundance. One of the things that I want to talk about with you before we launch into all of our work today is one of the questions that came up last week about technology challenges. I want you to know that at TENS, we have been thinking about this for a long time. Well, a long time being since March, when the whole world changed. And we knew that we needed to create resources this year that were going to be ready for you in whatever situation you were going to be in come stewardship season this year. So if that is, you're still 100% virtually gathered, we have a process for you to be able to run stewardship this year. If you are a hybrid church, wherein some people are meeting in person and some people are choosing to stay at home, we have ways for you to engage that. And if you're all back in church again, we have ways for you to run your stewardship campaign that way as well. So we do realize, though, that not everyone is on Zoom or Google Hangouts or Facebook. So we have some strategies to help you reach out to those people. And one of them that I've heard most recently, it comes from a church in my diocese in California. The folks at Transfiguration in San Mateo, they organized their Gen Z participants, their members who are of a younger generation, to reach out on the phone to folks who felt a technological challenge in being able to gather virtually. And they walked them through on the good old-fashioned telephone how to set up Zoom, how to get on Facebook. They walked them through all of the steps. Not only was that really helpful to folks who felt a barrier to technology, but it was this amazing synergy, intergenerational synergy between younger members and older members who may pass each other in church and not talk. But here they were having these great, rich conversations about technology and how to stay in touch with each other. There are lots of ways that we can help people get comfortable with our technology, and we have to understand that some people will never be comfortable with this. One of the benefits to using Zoom, and I see that we have a couple people today who are joining us by the telephone, is you don't have to have a laptop or a mobile device and show your camera and do all of that. You can participate from a phone and be as active in Zoom as you are if you are showing your camera. So for folks who don't have a webcam or folks who don't want to be on a webcam, you can always join with your phone and you can hear and be heard. You just can't see. It's a way to stay in touch, and I want to remind people that the phone is a technology that everyone is comfortable, what most people are comfortable with. Not everybody feels safe online, right? And so Zoom has released a number of security features in the last few months. Your diocese may have information on how or is best to stay secure. You noticed today you came into a waiting room. That was a chance for us to say, is this a real person, a name that we recognize, someone who signed up? Yes, let them in. There are also controls for the people who are hosts to be able to mute someone or take off a camera if someone's acting inappropriate, or even remove them from the conversation if things are really out of control. So there are ways using the technology to keep things safe, and we need to do that in all of our worship and ways that we get together. And then we need to think about all the ways that we partner together. There are people in your congregations who know the technology really well. Mobilize them to help people who are less familiar with technology. I just wanted to give those best practices as we move into talking about how to use resources for a virtual stewardship. So what is different about stewardship in 2020? I should ask first, are there any questions on what we've just talked about? Ken and Victor, anything? Great.
Yeah, there is some question as well that have been kind of floating in the air sometime in conversations, and is the present challenges about what is different and what is new from TENS to how address the present challenges in stewardship this year. You know, like what are the specific ways that TENS can help us address these present challenges of online church, as we are putting it, hybrid. You know, like how can we be addressing with the TENS resources that we have access to?
Sure. Well, we'll be walking through that today, and we'll talk about a timeline on and the tools that TENS offers, and how you, beginning now in August, can begin shaping your congregation's thoughts around stewardship and preparing them. We have a calendar of when you should send out your materials and how that should work and who should be in touch. And one of the things that we touched on last week that we'll go into more detail about today are the small group processes that are used to help congregations develop some community or some real theological thinking about stewardship and generosity. So as we move into this, there are ways that we want to help you create all the opportunities for our congregations to be gathered. That is to say, some people will use the mail, some people will use email, some people will be using virtual tools like you are using right now. We'll walk through some of the specifics of that as we move forward. So there are a number of things that are different in 2020 from our stewardship campaign in 2019. So as we talked, communities are meeting virtually. That's new. We've all had to learn how to adapt and adopt new technologies and new strategies since March. There's economic fallout, and that's real. We haven't had a situation that is this bad since the Great Recession in 2008, and our congregations are feeling it. We understand that, and so we have some tips that we'll go through later to talk about ways that we can message our stewardship this year and address these issues. And then there's uncertainty about what recovery looks like and what 2021 will look like. It's hard to make plans for 2021 when we really don't know what's left around the corner for us. There's going to be change perhaps in Washington. There's going to be change in our economic systems. There are going to be changes that impact our daily lives. We don't know where the virus will be. And so we have to budget and think about next year when there's great uncertainty. We'll walk through some of those conversations and tools. So what are the TENS materials and how can we help you? If you've used TENS materials in the past, one of the things you'll notice this year that we haven't done before, so we have a worksheet, an instruction guide that walks through the how, the when, and the who of how to set up your virtual stewardship this year or your regular in-person stewardship this year. So one of the things that we're talking about when we are creating virtual stewardship is to choose your technology. Last week, we covered a lot of options for different virtual offering plates, ways that communities could begin to solicit gifts online and run that through their treasurer. We're going to talk more about some of those challenges and issues at the end of this call, but I wanted to just highlight the fact that we are, in fact, suggesting that you find some technology. And that's about receiving money. It's about communicating. So if you haven't set up your e-newsletters and things like that, it's a good way to do that. Your website, you should have it up to date. You should have all of your options for giving listed on your website so that folks can make their gift easily. And whatever tools you're going to use to gather virtually. You're probably all experts in now by whatever you're using, Facebook Live or Google Meets or Zoom, YouTube, whatever you're doing. Keep doing that. Keep getting the word out and helping people adopt to it. Do your website and your social media, your streaming services offer ways to gather pledges and gifts online. So make sure that you have all these tools and links in place so that as people are encountering you and their stewardship campaign this year, they have the resources in front of them to be able to do what they need to do. And have you looked at your newsletter in a while, right? So newsletters, just like the front page of a newspaper, has to change every once in a while, right? Where the big picture is, where the story is, how things are organized. Because if we see the same thing over and over again popping into our inbox, and it looks just like last week's announcement, we may start to not read them, not click to open them. So we need to change up our stewardship or our newsletter, especially during stewardship season. Maybe make it a little punchier, maybe change the order of things, let people know that something new is happening. It's a small tweak you can do in your communication to let people know that you're doing something different this year. One of the other pieces that we offer in the TENS materials, which are free to you, is understanding and helping you shape the committee that will be hosting these stewardship talks or having small groups or be a part of your committee for stewardship. And so we suggest that you gather testimonials from members. Start now because they'll take some time to gather. You can with your phone, you can record a video of people talking about why they're a member and what matters to them and why they continue supporting your church year after year. And people can upload those videos, share those videos. Often when we are gathered in person during stewardship season, we do testimonials or minutes for mission, and they happen at the announcement hour, or maybe they happen at the beginning or the end of the service. Well, when we are not able to gather in person, we have to find ways to still help each other, our members, talk about why stewardship matters to them and why the ministry matters. So make use of your tools. And start now by gathering some testimonials. We're going to recommend this year that you use small groups to teach generosity and develop community. We're going to go into more detail about that in a minute, about what these small groups look like. And then what are the pieces of collateral that you need to create the marketing or stewardship materials, your budget, and are you creating pie charts or graphs or bar graphs? What does it look like to help people understand how the budget fits together and how their gift fits into the budget and the needs of the congregation? Do you usually do like a trifold or a folded brochure? Can you send that out electronically? How would you do that? Think through these things now while you have time, and understand how you will create your materials. And TENS has lots of ways to help you. If you want to talk later or look on our website, we have lots of examples of stewardship materials that people have used in the past. We have a timeline this year, and this is new from last year. We've never released before a timeline on to help you create your stewardship campaign this year. And it's really specific because this year is really different. So we recommend that right now in August, you start running some announcements in your newsletter or making announcements on your live church services. Let people know that stewardship is going to begin soon, begin teaching about it. TENS has resources not just for the October and November months, but we do periodic resources, reflections throughout the year. We have some two for the season of Pentecost, and the August one is now ready for you to use. It relates, it's a summary of the Gospels of August and helps you put together some thinking about how your stewardship theology might be formed by what people are hearing on Sundays and preaching about it. So begin now using those resources. We have ways for you to kick off, and we'll talk about what kickoff Sunday looks like. This year, October 4th is the day that many congregations will begin, but it's St. Francis Sunday. We acknowledge that some people focus on animals that day. My church is one of them. We're still figuring out how we're going to bless animals virtually. It'll make the dogs and cats happy because they don't always like being together in church. But we'll figure that out. But if yours is a congregation that blesses animals on St. Francis Sunday, stewardship might be hard to kick off that day too. If you can do it, great. If not, you can begin on the next Sunday, the 11th, and still have plenty of time to operate a full stewardship campaign. We have weekly inserts, and we'll be talking about them as we go through this session today. The weekly reflections tie into the readings for the day, and they give a specific theological statement around stewardship. And they have two questions, thought-provoking questions at the end of each one. This is a way that you can use to develop a preaching resource, also a small group topic, or a Zoom coffee hour forum if you're doing that in your congregations. These connections help people frame what they've just heard and think about the theology. And then, of course, we want to talk about your dedication Sunday. So what happens in the pre-campaign? That's now. It started whenever you could start, and it goes until October. The pre-campaign, remember to start as soon as you can. I don't say that to panic you, but I say it to remind you that everything takes a little bit longer in the pandemic. It takes longer to get people together. It takes longer to accumulate resources. It takes longer. So everybody is busy and they're trying to manage work and family and life in the ways that we normally do, only our worlds are smaller and more insane right now. So help people with that. Start as early as you can. Research your technology. So if you're developing a virtual offering plate or an online pledging system, your website or your newsletter, research it, implement it, test it, make sure it's ready to roll out and accommodate your stewardship campaign when you begin. Build the hype, right? So Episcopalians are terrible evangelists often, and we don't often talk about the most exciting things that we are doing. So start making the announcements now. Tell people about your stewardship. We have an introduction to what faith-filled generosity is. That's one of the things that you could download and begin to distribute, just to get people in the mindset that there's a theme, a way that we're thinking about our stewardship this year. Prepare theologically. As I talked about earlier, get people thinking about it, thinking in their hearts and in their minds about what stewardship is. We suggest that you drop your first letter from clergy talking about this year's stewardship campaign in mid-September. So that gives people, it gives the post time to deliver it. I don't know if your mail is slower this year or not, but mine certainly is. So it gives that time to get out there. Also send it in email. During your campaign, so as we kick off, hold a special service or hold a special forum. Make it exciting. I was talking with a rector in Akron, Ohio yesterday, or the day before, and we were chatting about the way that they kick off their campaign. And they usually have like a little catered lunch. The stewardship committee caters lunch for everybody, and they have a big party. And they were lamenting that they couldn't do that this year because they weren't going to be gathering in person. And so they've organized with their caterer, or they're going to organize with the caterer, to have little bags. People can go and pick up their bag, take it home, share the same lunch with each other, and get on Zoom and talk about their stewardship campaign, right? So that's how that community is going to kick off virtually with a little shared meal. Not every congregation might want to do a catered lunch, but there are ways that you could using that example, you can have people share cookies or bread or things like that. Drop it off or have it in bags ready for people to be able to pick up and share something together with each other for this Sunday. Or for the kickoff Sunday. It's a way to share community and let people know that something exciting is happening. As soon as you kick off, it's time for the next letter to go out. So sometimes that comes from a warden, sometimes that comes from your stewardship chair, sometimes it comes from a combination of folks. So as you kick off your campaign, send that second letter, and we have samples in the materials that you can download on what a letter from the clergy is like and what a letter from the wardens or stewardship chair is like. They're in Word so that you can copy them into your format, put your letterhead on it. You can put in your own examples. We don't want you to send our letter. We want you to send your letter, but we give you some framework to do that. Send it with your stewardship materials. So if you're dropping that in the mail, or if you are sending that in email, make sure that everybody has their pledge card and the case for giving, or whatever the budget, whatever you are giving out this year to do that. Keep in mind, we can't rely on people to pick up their envelopes from the back of the church like we normally do. And so you may have to use the postal service. And depending on how much collateral you send, that can get expensive. So do try to use email as much as you can. It'll make it easier. And maybe just send mail to those households that don't want to be online or can't be online. That's for you pastorally to sort through and figure out, but we want you to make sure that you can get the information out to people. Use our weekly pledge or inserts, pledge season inserts. So these are weekly meditations, as we talked about. They are in PDFs and in Word, so that you can put them in whatever bulletin you have. If you're doing paper bulletins, if you're blessed enough to be in person, or if you are emailing them out, we have those ready to go. And then convene the small groups. We'll talk about small groups soon. Finally, make a big deal about the end of your campaign as well. So kickoff and dedication are really important in a campaign. Kickoff reminds people that we are doing this, we are unified, we are excited about it. Dedication brings all of those gifts in. We have a blessing of them. We talked about that last week, ways to bless the gifts and some liturgical actions that we can do when our pledges come in. Make sure you do something really exciting to end your campaign. We usually recommend that the first of Advent is a good time to end your campaign. If that interferes with other things you do on the first of Advent and you have a big day, some congregations finish up on Christ the King the Sunday before. Whatever is your tradition is what you should do. But make it a big deal. Make it a special day. Make sure you thank everyone. Remember the mission. This is not just at the dedication, but all throughout. Why are people making gifts? Why are you asking for stewardship this year? Remember to talk about all the great things that your congregation is doing in the community, and help people get out of the church and get out of the smallness of our pandemic world, where we are staying at home and we forget sometimes all the work that our gifts do. And of course, implement a follow-up plan to reach households who have not yet been able to turn in their pledges.
Thank you, David. There is a question here that came up. Is there a rule for what goal you should set relative to what last year's total was in pledges?
There is not a rule. There is not a set rule for that. And this year, I think it's hard to, sometimes we say, we want everyone to pledge 15% more than they did last year. And that's great. I think that might be a little bit of a hard sell this year. I think some of our congregations are in places and some of our members are in places where that wouldn't just be impossible, but perhaps might be insulting. So we need to think that through this year. I think that you should always ask for people to give more than they gave last year. So that's a different kind of message. It's not saying this percentage, but can you do more? And be open to the ways that people can do that. I'm a fundraiser, so money is always the way that people can do that. But there are other ways that you can ask people to be involved, and the time and the talent piece of stewardship is also really important. If you can't, or in addition to giving more money, are there other things that you can help us do? Are there things that you can dedicate your time to? Do invite that in, and it helps people feel more connected and feel more possible during a campaign. But there isn't a hard and fast rule. The one thing I will suggest is that you not have the treasurer talk about what the goal should be. Because treasurers will look at the numbers and they'll present it as a number figure. And so I would say find a theological or a spiritual way that people can uplift their giving and set that as a goal. One congregation that I work with here in the Diocese of California, St. Peter's in Redwood City, not only do they have a goal that they put in for, this is what we're looking at for our pledges this year, and they pray about that. They also have a new member goal. We need 10 new families this year. And they put out that number, right? It's not the same every year. We need 6 new families. We need 10 new families, whatever it is. And so everybody can be working toward that. Goals give everyone something to work toward. So I do like the idea of goals.
David, there is another question here related to materials. So we would like to excerpt the weekly materials in our newsletter. Is that allowed?
Absolutely. These are your materials. They are free for you to use in any way. We don't, once we release them to you, they're yours to do. So we give them to you in Word, which you can then copy and paste into whatever email or you're using for your weekly bulletin. We also give them to you in PDF so that you can just send them out as an attachment, whichever way works for you.
Mm-hmm. And there is some folks as well sharing some good practices. There is one comment that says each player gets a handwritten thank you note from members of the stewardship committee and vestry members. So personalizing that connection.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanking is so important. And I love handwritten notes. I do them as a general rule. When I receive a gift, I make a thank you note. I have a little, personally, I have a Friday practice of thanking people throughout the week who have done something extraordinary. And usually I send an email because it's easier sometimes than writing out something. But gratitude is a beautiful way to acknowledge what someone has done. So please, please, yes, thank people when they make their pledge, when they finish their pledge. Let people know that you are grateful for it.
David, stewardship in 2020 comes with more challenges than just mechanics of campaign. Has TENS been thinking about how to talk about fundraising in light of the economic and social concerns that we are facing today in the church and in the wider community as well?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about some of these. And they are the elephants in the room of our stewardship season this year, right? So how do we talk about money when there's economic fallout from pandemic-related unemployment? The first thing that I always talk about to stewardship committees and to clergy when we're thinking about fundraising in church is that giving is a gift. It is not shame. It is not duty. It is not, it's not something that we should make people do. It's something we should invite people to do. And so that invitation comes for you to prayerfully consider what you can provide the church this year and what you can do. And it does not ask you to give so much that you can't pay your bills or that you sacrifice things for your family. We acknowledge that some people will not be able to make the same gift that they made last year. It's sometimes good just to say that right up front. We want you to know that every gift matters. Please make your best gift. And then we have to assume, and I say have to, we must assume as Christians that people are making prayerful, intentional, best gifts when they make their stewardship. So whatever gift they have made, they have wrestled with that. They have talked in prayer about that. They have spoken with their family, and they've made the best gift that they can. So remember that some families are struggling. Remember that some families aren't struggling. So this is the other thing that we want to talk about. Not every family or every household is in the same position. Some are doing all right. Some are in a position to do more. Some are not. So every case is individual. And as we think about how to message our stewardship this year, let's remember that pledging is a pastoral thing. And when we do that, we're having conversations. We talked about this last week. When we talk about money with our fellow Christians, we're not just talking about cash or checks. We're talking about their lives and their hopes and their dreams, their beautiful, rich, theological, pastoral conversations. The other elephant in the room, I think, is that some congregations are going to be faced with some cuts this year. And that's really hard when you approach stewardship season and you're asking people to make gifts, and they may see staff members reduce their hours, or they may see programs in jeopardy or perhaps being cut. So I want us to be able to head those off at the pass, as it were, and be able to talk with people very honestly. Last week we spoke about it. This week we'll say it again. Transparent and accountable leadership is really important, especially when we are in moments of crisis like we are right now. So keep your conversation focused on the mission. The work of the church continues, and perhaps is even more acute this year with our neighbors because there's greater need in our community. So even though we may have fewer resources to spend on mission, how do we find other ways to do the good work of God? So really think that through theologically, understand and train your stewardship committee to be able to talk about that and uplift people. If your congregation was one of the ones that received an SBA or payroll protection plan loan, remind members that this insulated staff for a while. We did what we could do, and thank your staff and your treasurer for doing all the paperwork that came with those loans. It really helped some congregations and has made a difference. So now we may be, as that money runs dry, we may be facing another cliff. Be clear about that. We accessed the money that we could. We were good stewards of our reserves and of the money being offered by federal sources and state sources. We've been doing a good job of trying to collect as much as we can to insulate ourselves from this fallout, and now we are at this point. So be honest, again, transparent and accountable leadership. And this is the thing not to overlook. There may be some members who are doing all right or are doing really well. The stock market has kind of rebounded in some ways. So people who make gifts from securities may not be having the bad year that, that it looked like maybe they would have before. There are some members in your congregation that may be able to make an extraordinary gift to cover your shortfall. If your congregation has these people in it and you may not know who they are, you may not be ready for it, or you may be keeping them for some other project in mind, right? We're gonna redo the sanctuary or the kitchen next year, and I don't wanna tap them now for that gift. It may be the time, if you're facing real shortfalls, to make those big asks and ask people to make some extraordinary giving. And then let's talk about uncertain times, right? So we don't know what 2021 is going to bring. It is so hard to ask people to make pledges on their 2021 contributions, not knowing what it's going to be like. But we have to remember that stewardship is hopeful. Church is hope. Our Christian duty is to be people of hope in the world. And so back in Epiphany, we heard this gospel. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? I don't know about more value. Sometimes I feel birds are pretty great. But what we do remember is that uncertainty is always with us. And as we think about our hope, we move through the year and we ask people to make their best pledge. Also, as a part of Pledge Campaign, I remind people, make your best gift. And if you need to change that in the year, it is okay. People feel terrible when they have to change their gift, but it happens all the time. Maybe help people understand normalize that behavior, right? So if during the course of a regular year there's an illness, or there's a job change, or there's a household change, good or bad reasons, right? We can change our pledge throughout the year. We don't have to give what we put on that paper. We are in a community that loves, and so we will embrace people in that loving moment. Let people know that they can change their gift, and there's no shame in that. What's most important is that people, as said this before, people are making a prayerful, intentional, best gift. So remember that they are doing the hard work of asking God for guidance and talking with their family and making the best gift that they think they can.
Thank you, David. There is a private question here, and it's the question comes around sometimes facing. This is a lay leader, and this person is asking, how can I talk to my rector about this? What is the kind of work that we can do together so that we can speak the same language to parishioners, whatever situation they are?
That's great. Our clergy don't learn how to talk about money in seminary. It's not a skill that we teach, and so it's not always our first. It's not always our first way to think about relationship either. So helping your clergy, helping your pastor understand the theology of stewardship and understand how to message this is really important. And I think it goes back to that transparent conversation, open and honest conversation about helping people realize that over and over we can emphasize the spiritual discipline of stewardship, that it is a relationship, that it goes on all year round. Those are conversations that pastors can have using our gifts, helping people make their best choices. Those are skills that are right in the wheelhouse of a good preacher and a pastor. So help them emphasize the things that they are strong about so that they can set the stage for your stewardship this year. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, there is one here that I'm trying to bring back. There is question connected, especially to, I think, the following resources that we are going to gather, I think, and receive from TENS as well. There is, I think, the beauty at this moment is to see that there are some specific ways that we can be addressing a pledge campaign. Can you tell us what else the TENS resources open up for us this year? We are particularly interested to learn more about those small groups that we were talking about last Saturday during the other conversation, Stewardship 101, and how we can gather them and bring them to action in our specific places as well.
Great. That kind of cues up the next section of what I wanted to talk about anyway. So let's proceed with that, and we'll answer that question as it comes up. We're going to talk a little bit now about the other resources that TENS is providing this year, and how we can talk about these small groups. So the weekly inserts, please use them. They are really beautiful. They come from a diversity of voices, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but they are related to the readings. They help frame our readings for stewardship theme. They are theological and practical statements written by lay and clergy folks talking about faith and generosity. You can use them in all kinds of ways for the small group conversations that you may have, for virtual coffee hours. These are great resources for you. Each reflection has a couple of questions. They engage deeply in matters of stewardship and stewardship theology. You can also use them as inspiration for preaching. They come from a diversity of people. So I like always to have as many voices included in church as possible, because we get new perspectives when we hear the message from different people. So we've assembled weekly readings this year from people all across the church. Our resources are in English and in Spanish, so they can be used in many congregations. And they all approach our theology of stewardship in their own way and their own voice. So these small groups, we talked about them last week, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them now, because it's probably the most important change in how we run stewardship campaigns this year. So if your congregation is one that already does some house church or small groups or dinners at stewardship season, you may already be familiar with this process. But we suggest this year that members of the vestry or stewardship committee or other lay leaders facilitate the education of mission and teaching of good stewardship fundamentals through some virtual small groups. What does a small group leader do, and how should you recruit them? Well, they are committed to stewardship. They've already made their own pledge, and they embrace the theme of your stewardship campaign this year. They know and they believe in the case for giving for your community, so they know what mission and ministry your gifts support. And if they can't speak to them directly, they can direct you to who can. They know the budget of the church. So these people have heard and learned and can speak to it. So when people in their small group ask about the budget or ask about the mission, they can answer the questions or refer to them to people who can. A small group leader, they are a good listener and they are a facilitator. So small groups create intimacy, vulnerability, mutual support. Your listeners or your small group leaders aren't there so much to teach as to facilitate beautiful conversation about stewardship. They should be comfortable with technology. They should be able to run a Zoom meeting, at least know how to invite people and turn it on and turn it off, things like that. So if you need to teach them or help them learn that, we can do that. And they should be available. So I know people often volunteer to be a part of the stewardship team, and then they get really busy. And so August and September and October come around, and some members of the stewardship team who said they were going to be a part of it can't be a part of it anymore. So you want your small group leaders to be present, be people who are available and willing to host a few meetings to keep people in conversation. How many small groups do you need? So I suggest that you shouldn't have more than 12 in a small group. This allows for real deep connection, meaning, conversation, dialogue, and allows for everybody to get through their conversation in a reasonable amount of time. If you have too many people in a small group, it becomes rushed. If you have too few, so I would say 6 might be a bottom threshold, a threshold number. If you have too few people, then the conversation becomes forced, or there are awkward pauses. Oh, the introverts in the group. I'm an introvert, by the way. And I suggest that each group should meet 3 times during stewardship season, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. So you should have a small group around kickoff. So there's a big kickoff, and then your small group should meet. And they should talk about the stewardship materials, what that case for giving is. If you have pre-recorded testimonials, now is the time to view those and talk about them. And it's the job of the hosts of those small groups to make sure that everybody has their materials. So send them out electronically, put them in touch with the people if they haven't received theirs, how they can get theirs, make sure that everybody knows how to get and access their stewardship this year. I suggest a Bible study, and I'm going to show that slide that we did last week. that shows all the Bible passages that are great for stewardship conversations. Pick one of them and ask people to pray about their pledge and run one of those small groups as a Bible study around stewardship. And then we talked about some appreciative inquiry questions. So the last session, at least, that you have in these small groups should be about dreaming the possible. And this is where the invitation for the pledge will come from. We'll speak to those in just a minute. So a small group Bible study format, we talked about this last week. You're going to get this slide, so you don't have to copy it down. But this is just a model for what that small group Bible study may look like. Talking about, you know, reading a passage and reading it through in a diversity of voices, maybe read it 3 times, asking a different question each time. What's a phrase that stands out? What is God saying to you in this passage? And then what are you called to do? I love that for a Bible study on stewardship. This is the list of many passages that you could use in a Bible study on stewardship. You're going to get this slide after this presentation, so you can go back and look at this. We talked about this last week. I'm just putting it back in so that we can think about it. Appreciative inquiry questions. They dream about the possible. They frame the future in a positive light. So these are some questions that you might ask in your small group about the ministry and the future and the hope and what's possible in your community. We suggest that you use these. This might be the most controversial part of our recommendation for this year's stewardship campaign. We recommend that the small group hosts also extend the invitation to pledge to their members. So that's to say, the small group host should invite at the end of their session a peer-to-peer ask. And that's not to say you have to ask them how much they're going to give. You don't know what they gave last year. There's no money figure being talked about, but it's saying, will you join me in making a pledge? Here's how you can turn in your pledge cards. This is what needs to happen next if you're going to participate. Make them feel comfortable with it, but do the ask. As much as so I ask for money for a living, right? That's my job. And my palms sweat every time I do it. Doesn't matter the gift size, $5, $5,000, $5 million. I get nervous when I talk about money with people. You don't have to talk about money to invite people to make a stewardship gift. You're just asking them to participate. So I think that peer-to-peer solicitation is really important when it comes to asking for a stewardship gift, because it's authentic. Sometimes we put all of this on the clergy, making them do the hard work of making the ask. But when we ask each other as brothers and sisters for our gifts to participate and join in community, we are creating that safe place and that place where we share in the work that we're doing. So, Victor, are there any questions?
Yes, there is a question that came up, and the format of the small groups is, how do we assign people to these small groups? How do they begin?
I love that question. So I've seen it done many ways, and I'm going to suggest a few, and they all work. One of them is to create sort of affinity groups. So you may have, you know, a whole bunch of people who are knitters and they want to talk to each other. So put them in a small group for stewardship, right? You're knitting and crocheting and quilters, like they can have a small group and they are already probably talking with each other. Create a group around them and have them do their stewardship. You may have people who are into gardening or music or whatever. So use affinity groups as one way to assign those groups. Another that's equally valid is to, you have that list of people who are willing to host, and you look at the church directory and you say, who do you know best? Who are you most comfortable with? And you give them, if they're inviting 12 people, you say, pick 8, and then we're going to put 4 in so that nobody feels left out or last called. You don't want people to feel left out of your process. So that's really important. Another way to do that is just to divide up the list, right? So I'm going to take like A through D, and you're going to take E through H, and you're just going to assign groups in that kind of a way. Whatever it is, they end up being great groups because people are kind of flung together and they get to talk about stewardship. So how you assign that is how your congregation best reacts to these things. You know your congregation, but those are a few of the tools that I've seen done in the past. Try not to let them be too cliquey, right? So that's why I say, if you are asking members to choose who they know or who they're most comfortable with, don't let them fill their whole group with people that's just people there that are their friends. Make sure that they get a few people in there who are new, because that then opens circles for new friendship as well.
There is a contribution here to confirm. We are asking them to support the mission as opposed to asking them to make a financial contribution.
And that is a confirmation. Yeah, that is stewardship, right? So stewardship is about a financial gift, but using the language of stewardship, we talk about gifts and talents and opportunities and support for the mission. Yes, we understand that our gifts go towards salaries and utility bills, but that's not what people are excited about when they give their money to church. They're excited about what those salaries and light bills do for the community. So keep it focused on the mission and ask people to participate in that mission of the church. We all know intellectually how that money is being spent, and you have a budget and you have a treasurer who are there to tell you how last year's money is spent and how we might be spending this year's money. That can speak for itself. What you can focus on is the good work you're doing.
And David, last Saturday we had, and you were sharing with me that some of the feedback that you got on the evaluations were connecting us to information and challenges and costs of online fundraising, particularly in small congregations. Can you talk about that with us as we enter now the final part of this webinar?
Yeah. So yes, I'd be happy to do that. Last week, part of the feedback that we received was that, especially in developing a virtual offering plate, there were some resistances from vestries or treasurers, finance committee, to some of the costs that are associated with asking for money online. And the first thing to understand is that there are costs. So if you adopt a platform like PayPal or Tithely or greater giving tools, any of those, they have some sort of a cost perhaps to the church to set up. And then there's a transaction cost. And somebody has to bear that transaction cost. What do I mean by transaction cost? So if you use your Visa, your MasterCard, your Discover, your Amex, your debit card to make your gift, the platform that processes that transaction takes a little cut of it. That's how they make their money, and that diminishes from the possible gift to the church. So some of them are 2% or 3%, which is to say, if Davey makes a gift of $100 to your church, 97 of it goes to the church and $3 goes to the payment processor. Some of those payment processors allow the donor, the giver, to absorb those costs. So it might say, Davy, will you give $103 so that we take our 3 and 100 goes to your church? Those are just costs of doing business online. The thing is that we need to remember that when we don't ask for money online, when we don't give people a way to make their gifts online, we are leaving money on the table or in the purse or in the wallet or in the bank account, right? So I put together a few statistics from the 2019 Lake Institute study. The Lake Institute is funded by the Lilly School of Philanthropy at the University, or the Indiana University. And it was a comprehensive survey of all Christian denominations in the United States. And it looked at all kinds of giving patterns. The report is massive. But here are a few of the numbers that came from it. So it's not just millennials and Gen Z that give online. 40 to 59 are the ages that give the largest amount online. So think about that. It's right in that spot of a lot of our families in church. They are comfortable and they are already making gifts online across the country. Faith-based giving has grown 8.8% in the last 2 years, and 59% of donors are 66 and above, or 59% of donors 66 and above have made gifts online at some point. So this idea we have that folks, that late boomers don't make their gifts online is kind of false. So 59% of them have said, yes, we're willing to do this. If I can get my parents to make a gift online, you can get your folks to do it too. They can adopt this technology and it works. And then across mainline Protestant denominations, churches that accept donations online, here's the clincher, right? Churches that accept donations online increase their giving by an average of 32%. 32%. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of giving, and that's a lot of opportunity. So yes, when you look at those costs of doing online giving, you have to also look at the money that might be coming in. And if you're still skeptical about that, you can survey your congregation. Would you give online? Would it be helpful if we offered online giving tools? Get actual real data so that you know, okay, there's no interest. Well, then, you know, your treasurer was right. We shouldn't spend the money on it. But if lots of people say, I would be willing to give, it would be easy for me, I would feel comfortable, I really would like you to do it, then you have another data point. And so it makes that cost really possible. One more thing to say about the cost of fundraising platforms is that most of them can be free to implement for the church. So PayPal, Tithely, don't have church-related setup costs. So that means there's no monthly fee, there's no one-time setup. All the costs, all of the money that they make comes from the donor transaction. So, and if you ask them to cover it, then the church is getting its gift, and the church really isn't losing any money on each of those gifts that come in. The final way, and it bears repeating, the easiest way to make a gift to your church that's recurring, that doesn't use any fancy technology, already exists if you do your banking online and you log into your bank and you can have bill pay. And many of your banks use bill pay. It says, I'm going to take this money out of your account on this day of the month, and I'm going to mail a check, a paper check, to the address that you tell me to and the account that you tell me to. And that's one way that people who are completely uncomfortable with online giving can always do that through their bank's bill pay option. And checks, we know what to do with checks when they arrive at church. Are there any questions about the financial impacts of asking for money online?
Yeah, there is one here that came up and says, what are your thoughts about asking the donor to absorb the fee?
If people are making gifts to charities online, they're probably already used to this option. So if you use Network for Good or Razor's Edge, or you don't even know which platform the charity is using, it's just a seamless interface, there's often that question, will you increase your gift by whatever to cover the cost of this gift? So many donors are already used to that. And so doing it in church may be something that they're comfortable with. It's like, oh yeah, well, I want the church to get the whole donation, so I'll absorb it. The other way is just to say plainly, so $3 of your $100 gift will go to the payment processor, and we will have 97. If you want your whole $100 to go to the church, this is how you do it. And that's just the responsibility that we all have to each other. It's good to note that those fees, if you absorb them, are still tax deductible. They are considered a restricted donation of sorts. So your treasurer can issue, if you, in my example, I give $100, and so I give 103, and $3 goes to the payment processor, and $100 goes to the church. Your treasurer can, with good, clean conscience, issue you your letter saying that you gave $100, and that's tax deductible for that full amount. And you, the donor, can say, and I spent $3 to do that. So $103 when you talk to the IRS is the amount that you can claim for your tax deduction. It's a restricted donation service.
David, there's in the context of this conversation as well, there's something that comes up again and again, and is well, these time are different times. They are not normal times in many sense of the word, and that stewardship is relational. I think something that you come up again is something that we built with time, and this time more than ever, we need to be intentional about relationship and how to keep that connection with our parishioners, with our donors, and all that. Could you say a bit more about this importance of relationship, relation, and stewardship?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's all about relationship and communication. And it is the same when we are gathered in person. There are, we have to communicate what's going on, what our reasons for making decisions, our vestry notes. They are perhaps published, and people can always check into the governance of church and how decisions are made. We communicate our mission all the time. You're always talking perhaps about the food pantry that you support, or the after-school program that you support, or whatever it is that you do in your congregation. We're always talking about the mission and how to communicate that. During virtual times, when people are feeling isolated, on a normal year, I might not read every email that my rector sends me, or every newsletter, right? But I find myself hungry for that kind of communication in the time of isolation. I haven't seen my priest in months, except on a camera. I really miss her. And I miss my friends at church too. So the communication is really important. One of the things that we got away from in years past in our church communications was a lot of the individual information, like how people are doing. We restricted our communications mostly to events and timeline and calendars, right? We stopped telling some of the stories about what people are doing in their lives, or what people need. If people are going through hardship, we have a prayer list perhaps, but we don't talk about a family that might need something in our newsletters. We restrict that to whatever. Well, in these days, I'm suggesting that since our newsletters are our only way to communicate. We put that information back in, make people feel like a family with each other, make people understand that we are celebrating birthdays still, we are still celebrating anniversaries, we are still doing the work of church and family, even when we are away from each other. So yes, over communicate. And I find that people aren't unsubscribing right now for getting too much email. They're not annoyed. This is a way that we need to stay in touch with each other. So please do it.
Okay, and just to enter into this concluding part of our presentation webinar today, I just want to thank you, Debbie. I think the resources that you're bringing, the resources that TENS is offering to us today, they are really critical and real, I think, to what we are facing today. And something that I think keeps coming back to is that they are accessible. They are just things that we just can copy, paste. So the invitation now is to access them. And there was some question here that came up on the chat and suggesting that maybe there is a way that we can communicate directly to Davey. So that is that possible, Davey?
Absolutely. I'm going to put my email address in here. Please send me an email. And I would love to talk through, if you just want to bounce some ideas off, if you want more resources, if you want ideas, please get in touch with me. I'm happy to be your resource. That's what TENS does. We help congregations with their stewardship and with their fundraising. So I love to do this. And if I don't know the answer, I can probably put you in touch with a rector or a board member who is doing that work and put you in touch with them. So yes, please get in touch with me. Also in the chat, I just put out a request for you to fill out a very brief survey. It's only 3 questions. It'll only take you 2 minutes. Please fill it out. It'll help us understand what was useful in this webinar, what your lingering questions are, and we may do more if Ken and Victor invites us. We can continue doing these into August and September. If there are more sessions that you guys want, we're happy to talk about that. So your answers on the survey will help us figure out what it is that you're hungry for and how we can help you with it.
Yeah, and connected to that, there was something that came up on the survey answers from the previous presentation that we are now thinking of coming back with a new topic. I think, as David was suggesting, September will be the time next month. Will be the time where we can, again, have more conversations around stewardship here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to come back. I love this. I mean, y'all make me get up at early in the morning to do this on the West Coast, but I don't mind. It gets me started early on my day, and I'm happy to see y'all and be able to talk with you. I've just put in the link to access the TENS materials again, and I saw that Ken and Victor had done it before. So these are free for you. So please, the link and the password and login are there. This session was recorded, so I will, by the end of the day, post it to YouTube and then send you all the link and also the slides, the PowerPoint slide deck that you saw. I will send that out to you so that you can share it with your friends and neighbors and anyone who wants to talk about stewardship.
Thank you, Davey, and thank you for sharing with us all these resources. And you're a blessing to all of us, especially during this time. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, friends. Blessing on abundance for your stewardship, and we'll see you very soon.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.